For 3 years, Hannah Miller believed she had built the kind of marriage people envied. Friends often remarked on the way Jonathan looked at her, or how his hand always found hers in crowded rooms. They lived in a modest house on the edge of Duluth, Minnesota, with a yard that sloped gently toward the woods, and in the quiet evenings they shared routines that felt unshakable. Jonathan would come home from work, drop his keys in the same ceramic bowl by the door, kiss her on the forehead, and ask what was for dinner. He laughed often, worked hard, and promised that weekends were theirs. So when Jonathan mentioned a weekend fishing trip with his closest friends, Brian Collins, Scott Edwards, and Kevin Brooks, Hannah felt no hesitation. These were the men he had known since college, companions who had shared hunting blinds and campfires in northern Minnesota. Fishing trips were their tradition. Jonathan's eyes sparkled the night before he left, like a boy allowed one more summer adventure. "We'll be up near Lake Superior," he said, throwing a sleeping bag into the back of his truck. "The old log cabin in the pines. Just us, the fire, and the lake. Don't worry if I don't have service. Half the time those woods are a dead zone." Hannah kissed him goodbye at the door. "Have fun," she told him. "Catch something worth bragging about." He grinned, pulled her into a quick hug, and was gone, the sound of the truck fading into the distance. The house grew still in his absence. The first day alone passed slowly. Hannah cleaned, reorganized a shelf, even started a podcast, but the silence pressed in like a weight. She realized how much of her rhythm depended on Jonathan's presence. The clatter of his boots in the entryway, the way he whistled off-key while shaving, the habit of falling asleep with his arms slung, heavy across her waist. By evening, the house felt too large. She microwaved leftovers, sat at the table alone, and wished for the sound of his voice. As dusk settled outside, Hannah leaned against the counter, sipping tea, and the thought arrived, quietly but firmly. Tomorrow was Jonathan's birthday. They had planned a small celebration when he returned, but why wait? Why not surprise him? She pictured his face lighting up when she appeared at the cabin door, arms full of his favorite food. The image grew warmer the more she considered it. The decision took root. Early the next morning, Hannah tied her hair back, pulled on an apron, and opened the pantry. The kitchen filled with the familiar, comforting chaos of preparation. She started with dessert because dessert mattered most to Jonathan. Apple pie, the one her mother taught her to bake. Thick slices of tart apples tossed in sugar and cinnamon, laid neatly into a buttery crust. She rolled the dough carefully, folded the edges just so, brushed cream across the top, and slid it into the oven. While the pie baked, she turned to the main course. Chicken wings seasoned with paprika, garlic, and a dash of cayenne. Jonathan loved them crisp, the skin blistered and golden. She lined 2 trays, set the temperature high, and let the heat do its work. The scent filled the kitchen, sharp and mouth-watering, mingling with the sweeter aroma of apples and pastry. On the stove, a pot of hearty soup simmered. She diced onions, carrots, and celery, stirring them into the broth until the steam fogged the window above the sink. Minnesota mornings in early October carried a bite, and she knew the men would welcome something warm after hours by the lake. She baked a pan of soft rolls as well, brushing them with butter until they shone. Between timers, she cleaned as she went, humming along with the radio, lost in the rhythm of care. She imagined Jonathan's friends gathered around the table, laughing with surprise when she arrived. She saw Jonathan's arms open wide, the pride in his eyes when he told them, "My wife drove all this way just to bring us dinner." By noon, the kitchen looked like the scene of a holiday. Cooling racks held pie and rolls. Containers of soup lined the counter. Foil covered the trays of chicken wings. Hannah set out a large thermal tote and began to pack. Pie wrapped in a clean towel, soup ladled into sturdy jars, rolls stacked in layers, wings sealed tight. She added napkins, plates, utensils, even a thermos of fresh coffee. The bag felt heavy, but in a satisfying way, as if it carried not just food but intention, care, and devotion. When she zipped the tote shut, Hannah stepped back and let the satisfaction settle. Tomorrow would be Jonathan's birthday. She was ready to make it one he would never forget. The next morning broke pale and cold, with a thin mist curling above the rooftops. Hannah loaded the thermal tote into the back seat of her car, double-checked the containers to be sure nothing would spill, and slid behind the wheel. She tightened her scarf, started the engine, and watched her breath cloud the windshield before the heater caught up. The plan filled her chest with a nervous excitement, a flutter between her ribs that made the morning feel charged with possibility. The first miles were simple, paved roads cutting through the outer edges of Duluth, past shuttered diners and half-empty parking lots. But soon the blacktop gave way to Tulane County roads, lined with birch and pine. The leaves had already turned, painting the canopy in bands of orange and red, the kind of autumn color that made northern Minnesota feel otherworldly. The sky was a hard, brilliant blue, the air crisp and sharp. Hannah rolled her window down, just enough to let in the scent of pine needles and damp earth. She glanced at her phone once, but the bars had already dropped to 1. She knew from past trips that the last stretch toward Lake Superior's inland cabins offered no service at all. Jonathan had mentioned it often, half complaining, half amused, dead zone. You could disappear out there and no one would know till Monday. Hannah smiled faintly at the thought. This time, she told herself, he would be the one surprised. The road narrowed, twisting deeper into the forest. Ruts jolted the car, forcing her to slow to a crawl. She drove carefully, keeping both hands firm on the wheel as branches arched overhead and shadows flickered across the windshield. Somewhere beyond the trees, she imagined the cabin waiting, Jonathan and his friends still yawning from a late night, not expecting anyone, least of all her with a bag of food warm enough to steam in the chilly air. Her heart beat a little faster. She pictured Jonathan's expression when he opened the door. First confusion, then delight, maybe even embarrassment in front of the others. But the good kind, the kind that proved she had gone out of her way because she loved him. The thought made her cheeks warm. The car climbed a slight rise, then leveled out. Ahead, the forest opened into a small clearing used for parking. Hannah slowed, expecting to see the usual line of vehicles. Jonathan's aging truck, Brian's SUV with its dented bumper, Scott's weathered Jeep, Kevin's rusty minivan. Instead, she braked hard. Parked in the clearing were cars she did not recognize. A new pickup gleamed in the sunlight, spotless and expensive, the kind that looked straight off a dealer's lot. Beside it sat a bright red sports car, low to the ground, utterly impractical for back roads like these. A small city coupe completed the row, its paint polished, its tires too clean to have traveled far on rutted dirt. For a moment, Hannah thought she had taken a wrong turn. She checked the landmarks automatically, the curve of the trees, the old split-rail fence sagging at the edge of the lot, the familiar track leading deeper into the woods. This was the place, the same clearing Jonathan had described, the same one she remembered from a summer years before when she had joined them for a day. She turned off the ignition. Silence fell inside the car, heavy and absolute. Then, from the distance, the forest carried a sound that did not belong here. A bass line, pounding and relentless, thudded through the trees. Not the quiet strum of a guitar by a fire, not the easy rumble of men's voices, but pulsing synthetic music, the kind meant for clubs, not cabins. Hannah sat frozen, her hand still resting on the keys. The tote on the back seat seemed suddenly absurd, almost mocking in its domestic weight. She strained to listen, and the sounds grew clearer. Along with the music came laughter, high-pitched, shrill, unmistakably female. The kind of laughter that tumbled over itself, bright and carefree, completely out of place in the story she had been telling herself on the drive north. Her pulse quickened. Something was wrong. The air outside looked the same. The trees stood where they always had, but the clearing felt altered, warped. Hannah tightened her grip on the steering wheel, then slowly let go. With deliberate care, she reached for the door handle. her ears still straining toward the music and the laughter echoing from the woods ahead. What she had imagined, a birthday surprise wrapped in warmth and love, suddenly wavered, replaced by an unease she couldn't yet name. Hannah stepped out of the car, the chill of the forest wrapping around her like a damp cloak. She left the tote of food on the back seat, its weight suddenly unbearable, and closed the door softly so the sound wouldn't carry. The pulsing music was clearer now, vibrating through the trunks of the trees, joined by bursts of laughter and the sharp pop of bottles being opened. Every step she took seemed louder than it should have been, the crunch of gravel under her shoes echoing in her ears. She followed the narrow track that led from the clearing to the cabin, a path she knew from memory. Branches scraped her jacket as she moved, and with each footfall her heart seemed to hammer harder. She told herself there had to be some explanation. Maybe other campers had rented nearby. Maybe she was imagining things. But when the trees broke and the cabin came into view, her breath caught in her throat. Light spilled from every window, unnaturally bright against the fading day. It wasn't the soft flicker of lanterns or the warm glow of a wood stove. This was electric light, harsh and glaring, throwing long shadows across the clearing. The music thudded from inside, bass reverberating against the wooden walls, turning the old structure into something strange and unrecognizable. Hannah crept closer, each step deliberate, as though the earth itself might betray her if she moved too quickly. She reached one of the side windows, where the curtain hung half open. Pressing her face to the cold glass, she looked inside. Her world shattered. The room, usually cluttered with fishing gear and smelling of pine smoke, had been transformed into a scene of chaos. The table was littered with bottles, whiskey, vodka, champagne, some half-empty, others toppled onto their sides. Smoke hung in the air like a fog. A cheap disco light spun from the corner, painting the log walls in lurid colors. And at the center of it all sat Jonathan. He was sprawled on the sagging couch, a half-empty bottle of champagne on the table before him. On his lap perched a young blonde woman in a cropped top and denim shorts, her head resting against his shoulder, his arm wrapped casually around her waist, his mouth close to her ear as he whispered something that made her throw her head back and laugh, exposing a smooth, toned stomach when her shirt rode up. Jonathan grinned, kissed the crown of her hair, then tapped her hip as if she belonged there. Hannah's breath hitched, but no sound escaped her lips. Her gaze darted across the room, and the nightmare only deepened. Brian, the one who always spoke so proudly of his wife and little boy, had his arms around two women at once, pulling one close by the neck while the other pressed against his side. Scott, who often complained of migraines and exhaustion, pinned a dark-haired woman to the wall, his mouth buried in her neck, his hand sliding over her body without shame. Kevin, usually so withdrawn and aloof at family gatherings, was suddenly animated, his hand disappearing beneath the hem of another woman's skirt as she shrieked with laughter. The cabin had become a place of debauchery, nothing like the fishing retreat Hannah had been led to imagine. The pounding music, the reek of alcohol, the shrill laughter of women draped over men who were supposed to be husbands and fathers, all of it blurred into a grotesque parody of the life she thought she knew. Hannah felt her chest tighten as though an iron band had wrapped around her ribs. She pressed harder against the glass, needing to be sure, needing to fix every detail into her mind. But the more she saw, the more her insides seemed to hollow out. Her vision sharpened unnaturally, every detail etched in cruel clarity, the angle of Jonathan's hand against the girl's hip, the gleam of sweat on Scott's temple, the way Kevin's eyes lit up with hunger. Her body trembled, but not with anger, not yet. It was the cold shock of betrayal, the kind that turned blood to ice. Her mind screamed to burst in, to throw open the door, to demand answers. But her body refused. She stood rooted, silent, a ghost outside her own life, watching everything she believed unravel. The tote of food she had so lovingly prepared flashed in her mind, the pie wrapped in a towel, the soup sealed tight against the chill. Now it seemed obscene, laughable, a cruel joke she had played on herself. For a long moment she felt nothing. No tears, no rage, only the numb weight of disbelief. The sounds of the party reached her through the glass, distorted and unreal, as though she were trapped behind a screen. She wanted to turn away, but her eyes stayed fixed, compelled to witness the collapse of everything she thought was safe. And still she said nothing. No gas, no sobi, no orgi offi fury. Only silence. Hannah did not move at first. Her palms flattened against the window pane, the cold seeping into her skin, grounding her even as the world inside spun further out of control. Then, slowly, as if guided by instinct rather than thought, she slid her phone from her jacket pocket. Her fingers moved without trembling. She tapped the camera, switched to video, and lifted the device until the lens caught the scene within. Through the glass, the phone recorded everything. Jonathan leaning close to the blonde woman, whispering something that made her laugh until tears glistened in her eyes. Brian dancing clumsily with two women pressed against him, his hands wandering freely. Scott pinning a brunette to the wall, their mouths locked together as his fingers clawed at her hip. Kevin sprawled in a chair, grinning wolfishly as his hand disappeared beneath a skirt, the girl arching into his touch. The camera lingered on each of them in turn, steady and deliberate. Hannah panned slowly across the room, capturing the debris of the party, bottles scattered across the table, some toppling into puddles of liquor, ashtrays spilling over with cigarette butts, clothing strewn on the floor. The throb of the music vibrated faintly through the glass, an ugly soundtrack that seemed to underscore the collapse of every promise Jonathan had ever made to her. She held the phone firm. Each frame was evidence, each face exposed under the harsh glow of light. She zoomed in, fixed on Jonathan's hand as it rested possessively on the blonde's waist, then shifted to the champagne bottle glinting beside them. Nothing was left ambiguous. When she was certain she had recorded enough, long, unbroken minutes of betrayal, Hannah lowered the phone. Her breath clouded the glass, briefly obscuring the sordid scene before her. She turned away. The walk back to the car felt endless. Her legs were stiff, her steps heavy, but she did not falter. She opened the back door, glanced at the tote on the seat, and left it there. The smell of roasted chicken, sweet pie, and fresh rolls seemed suddenly cruel, almost grotesque. She shut the door with deliberate care, climbed into the driver's seat, and started the engine. The road out of the woods stretched before her in a blur. The headlights cut narrow tunnels through the trees, illuminating branches that clawed at the night. She drove in silence, the music from the cabin still pounding faintly in her ears, though she was miles away now. Her grip on the wheel was rigid, but her mind was startlingly clear. Back home, Hannah parked the car in the driveway and sat for a long moment, staring at the house she had once considered safe. The tote remained in the back seat. She didn't bother to carry it inside. Instead, she walked straight to the living room, set her phone on the coffee table, and sank into the couch. The quiet of the house pressed around her, thick and suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. The ache came then, sharp and deep. Images replayed in her mind. Jonathan's grin as he kissed the blonde's hair, Brian's hands clutching two women at once, Scott's body pinning the brunette, Kevin's laughter. Her stomach clenched as if she'd swallowed glass. But even as pain rose like a tide, something colder surfaced too. Reason, calculation, a clarity forged by shock. Hannah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, though no tears had fallen. She reached for her laptop. All night she worked. The video played on loop as she froze frames, zoomed in on faces, took screenshots. She opened browser tabs one after another, combing through social media. A necklace caught in the frame became a clue, leading her to Christina, a university student whose posts were filled with glamorous selfies and vague hints about looking for a sponsor. A tattoo on another woman's shoulder revealed Lara, a dancer in a Duluth nightclub. Brightly colored nails led her to Alina, a nail technician who flaunted designer purses and luxury vacations on her profile. And the last, a brunette with a string of provocative photos, was Dasha, her captions laced with arrogance. Each discovery tightened the knot in Hannah's chest, but also sharpened her resolve. She copied links, saved screenshots, wrote down numbers listed carelessly in bios. Hours passed, the clock ticking toward dawn, yet she felt no exhaustion. Only the steady hum of purpose drove her forward. By the time the first gray light filtered through the blinds, Hannah had assembled a complete picture, for husbands who had lied for years, for women who had stepped willingly into their orbit, and herself, standing at the center, holding the truth in her hands. The pain had not left her. It sat heavy, a weight she knew she would carry for some time. But above it, colder and stronger, rose determination. She would not scream. She would not beg. She would not break. She had a plan. By mid-morning, Hannah sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, the faint light of a cloudy Minnesota day filtering through the blinds. Her phone rested beside her, screen black, waiting. She had not slept. Instead, she had spent the night pulling together every fragment of information she had uncovered. Profiles, photos, names, numbers. All of it had led to this moment. She reached for the second phone she had purchased years ago, a prepaid device with no ties to her name. With it, she created a new account, blank and anonymous. Her hands moved with clinical precision, the motions stripped of any hesitation. She opened the Messenger app, tapped Create Group, and typed the title in crisp letters, Our Fisherman. One by one, she added the participants. Emily Collins, Brian's wife, the woman who had trusted him with their son. Heather Edwards, married to Scott, who believed his headaches and late nights were real. Claire Brooks, Kevin's wife, calm and steady, who had stood by him through years of struggle. And then the women from the video. Christina, the blonde in Jonathan's lap. Lara, the nightclub dancer. Alina, the nail technician with the designer handbags. And Dasha, the brunette who flaunted herself online. 8 women in total, all connected by the lies of 4 men. Hannah scrolled to the file, tapped once, and sent the video. No words, no explanation, only the truth, delivered without comment. For a few moments, the chat remained silent. A single check mark, then 2. Hannah imagined the notifications buzzing in offices, kitchens, dorm rooms. She pictured each woman tapping the screen, waiting as the video buffered, their expressions shifting as the images played. The first message appeared. From Christina. What is this? Who are you? Lara chimed in seconds later. This better be some stupid joke. Where did you get this? Emily's reply cut through like a blade. Brian. What the hell is going on? Heather followed, her message in capital letters, the rage unmistakable. Scott, answer me. What is this nightmare? Claire's message was shorter, but no less deadly. Kevin. Is this you? The chat exploded. Christina again, frantic. Delete this. You can't send this around. Do you know what you've done? Dasha. Whoever you are, this is illegal. You'll regret this. I'll sue you. Alina tried to defend herself. I didn't know he was married. He told me he was single. I swear. Emily responded with a fury that bled through the screen. Don't you dare play innocent. That's my husband, the father of my child. You all disgust me. Heather, I am coming home right now. Scott, if you don't explain, don't bother being here when I arrive. Claire, so this is what our weekends really are. Fishing trips? You pathetic coward. The messages flew so quickly the notifications blurred together. Accusations, denials, threats. Christina insisting it was a setup, Lara swearing they were just hanging out, Alina begging to be believed, Dasha threatening lawsuits. The wives were merciless, their words sharp and furious, tearing into their husbands and the women who had shared the night with them. Emily, I should have known. You always had an excuse, and now I see why. You've humiliated us all. Heather, Scott, you are finished. Do you understand me? Finished. Claire, Kevin, you've lost everything. Don't even come home. The group chat became a storm, messages stacking one after another, the screen filling faster than Hannah could read. But she didn't need to follow every line. The outcome was already written. She sat back in her chair, her face expressionless, watching the chaos unfold like a spectator at a play. The anger, the panic, the lies unraveling in real time. It no longer felt like her burden alone. She had passed the weight to the people who needed to see it, and now it crushed them instead. Her phone buzzed again and again, the chorus of rage and betrayal echoing in digital form. Hannah didn't flinch. She closed her laptop halfway, folded her arms, and stared out the window at the gray sky. The truth was loose now. It could not be taken back, and she felt nothing but a cold, steady calm. By the next morning, the house was quiet, the gray light of late autumn pressing through the curtains. Hannah sat in the living room, a coffee mug cooling in her hand, a book open but unread on her lap. She had slept little, her mind too sharp, too awake. The phone lay on the table in front of her, the group chat still alive with furious messages. The sound of the front door opening broke the stillness. Jonathan stepped inside, his boots heavy on the mat. He looked disheveled but satisfied, his jacket smelling faintly of campfire smoke and cheap beer. "Hannah, I'm home," he called, his voice bright, almost triumphant. He dropped his duffel bag near the door, stretched and grinned. "You wouldn't believe the weekend we had. Best fishing trip in years." The fish were practically leaping into the boat. Hannah didn't rise. She didn't smile. She turned a page in her book with deliberate slowness and said evenly, "Hello, Jonathan." He blinked at her tone. He had expected warmth, the usual kiss and questions, maybe even laughter at his stories. Instead, her voice carried the flatness of weather reports, stripped of all affection. He stepped closer, searching her face. "What's wrong? You don't sound happy to see me." She looked up at him then, her eyes cold, stripped of every softness he had ever relied on. "Did you enjoy your time with Christina?" The name landed like a stone thrown into still water. Jonathan froze. The color drained from his face, leaving him ashen. His mouth opened, but no words came, only a strangled sound that died in his throat. Hannah closed her book, set it neatly on the table, and reached for her phone. She unlocked it with a swipe and held the screen out to him. The group chat glowed brightly, lines of accusations and threats filling the display. His eyes darted across the words, growing wider with each message. Emily's rage, Heather's fury, Claire's betrayal, the panicked pleas of Christina and the others. Jonathan's breath quickened. He scrolled frantically, his hands trembling. The truth was inescapable. Every face, every name, every secret laid bare in one place. His life unraveled before him in the space of a few glowing lines. How did this happen?" he whispered, his voice raw, his eyes pleading. "I showed them," Hannah said calmly. "I recorded what I saw. I created the chat. I didn't add explanations, Jonathan. Just the truth. The rest, you and your friends managed on your own." He dropped onto the couch as if his legs had failed him. His face sagged, his eyes glassy with panic. "Please, Hannah, let me explain. It wasn't what it looked like. I made mistakes, yes, but I can fix this. Don't leave me. Don't throw us away." Her gaze didn't waver. "Explain? Explain what? That the fishing trips were lies? That your friendship with Brian, Scott, and Kevin was just a cover for weekends like this? No, Jonathan. I don't need your explanations. I need space. And a lawyer." He reached for her, desperation written in every movement. "Don't do this. Don't end it like this. I love you. We can get past it." Hannah stood, slipping the ring from her finger. She placed it on the table beside her keys with a quiet finality that cut sharper than any scream. "You ended it," she said softly. I'm just giving it the name it deserves. She picked up her bag, walked to the door, and opened it without hesitation. Jonathan's voice cracked behind her, calling her name, begging, but she did not turn back. The door closed with a soft click, leaving him in the silence of a house that no longer belonged to him. Jonathan sat slumped on the couch long after Hannah left, the echo of the door, closing still, rattling in his chest. His phone vibrated relentlessly on the table, buzzing with calls and messages he didn't want to see. When he finally picked it up, the screen lit with the names of his friends, Brian, Scott, Kevin, each one calling in panic. He answered at last, his voice hollow. Brian. On the other end came a torrent of shouting. What the hell did you do, Jonathan? My wife has the video. Emily is screaming at me. She's packing her things right now. You're the one who brought those girls. You started this. Jonathan tried to protest, his throat raw. No, I didn't. Don't blame me. You were all there. You were worse than me. Another call broke through. Scott's voice erupted before Jonathan could form a sentence. Heather is done with me. She's throwing my stuff out on the lawn. She says she's calling a lawyer first thing tomorrow. This is your fault, Jonathan. If you hadn't let someone film. Then Kevin's voice joined, hoarse and furious. Claire is gone. She took the kids and emptied our accounts. She says she'll fight for every last dollar. We trusted you, Jonathan. We trusted you to keep this quiet. The line dissolved into overlapping accusations, each man desperate to shift blame. They shouted over one another, their friendship unraveling in real time. Years of loyalty collapsed under the weight of betrayal, each one clawing to escape responsibility. Jonathan clutched the phone, sweat beading on his forehead. It wasn't me, he cried, but the words sounded feeble even to his own ears. They didn't care. They only wanted someone to blame, and he was the easiest target. Outside of their frantic calls, the consequences spread like wildfire. Emily Collins wasted no time. By the end of the week, she had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. She packed her son's belongings, left the marital home, and took her case to court. Brian had once been a respected partner in a local construction firm, but Emily's swift action left him cornered. She demanded full custody, half of their shared assets, and a stake in the company. The community sided with her. Brian's colleagues distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with scandal. Heather Edwards was equally ruthless. She threw Scott out of the house the very night she saw the video. Neighbors watched as his belongings were dumped onto the porch, whispers trailing behind every box and bag. She refused to cover his debts any longer, leaving him saddled with car payments, credit cards, and a mortgage he couldn't handle alone. Within days, his financial footing crumbled. Claire Brooks was the quietest, but her silence was lethal. She filed meticulous paperwork, dividing every asset down to the last cent. Their lake house, their savings, even Kevin's beloved hunting cabin. Everything was liquidated or split. Then she took the children and moved in with her parents 2 towns over. By the time Kevin realized what was happening, Claire had already sealed the arrangements with her attorney. The small community around Duluth buzzed with the scandal. Word traveled through church groups, grocery store aisles, and workplaces. Everyone had seen or heard about the video by now. Some had even received it forwarded from anonymous numbers. The 4 men who once boasted about their fishing trips became the subject of disgust and ridicule. Brian was shunned by business partners who no longer trusted his judgment. Scott's co-workers whispered behind his back. Their respect evaporated. Kevin, once admired for his stoic demeanor, found himself pitted and mocked in equal measure. And Jonathan, he bore the brunt of it. With Hannah gone, the truth tied directly to his name, he became the face of the scandal. His reputation disintegrated overnight. The brotherhood, once held together by years of friendship and secrecy, splintered beyond repair. No one defended anyone else. Instead, they pointed fingers, each man insisting another had been responsible for inviting the women, for supplying the alcohol, for letting things get out of hand. Their bond, once their shield, dissolved into ash. In every corner of their lives, doors closed. Wives left, children were taken, businesses faltered, and reputations turned to dust. And in the quiet aftermath, the four men found themselves alone, each abandoned to the ruin they had created. The fishing trips that once promised freedom and camaraderie had become their undoing, the mask ripped away for everyone to see. Within a week of that disastrous weekend, Hannah filed for divorce at the county courthouse in Duluth. The process in Minnesota was straightforward. No fault, the papers labeled it, citing an irretrievable breakdown of the marriage. But behind the sterile legal terms stood evidence, so undeniable that Jonathan could not mount a defense. The video lived on 3 devices backed up to the cloud and already shared in ways that could never be undone. It was more than enough to tilt any negotiation. Her lawyer submitted the petition with quiet efficiency. The request was simple, an equitable division of assets, as the law required. Half the house, half the savings, half of everything they had built together. Jonathan could protest, but he had no leverage. His friends' imploded marriages had already set a precedent, and the stain of his actions was public knowledge. He signed the settlement because there was nothing else to do. When the decree was finalized, the life Jonathan once claimed as his unraveled completely. The house that had once held laughter and warmth no longer belonged to him. His accounts were split, his possessions inventoried, his name tarnished in every circle that mattered. The men he once called brothers avoided him, too consumed with their own wreckage to offer support. What had begun as camaraderie ended in bitter silence, each man isolated in disgrace. Jonathan moved into a small rented apartment near the edge of town, a place with peeling paint and thin walls, a far cry from the comfortable home he had shared with Hannah. Neighbors eyed him warily, whispers following him through hallways and grocery store aisles. At work, his colleagues stopped inviting him to meetings, their trust gone. He carried himself like a man aged decades in weeks, hunched and gray, every step heavy with defeat. For Hannah, the end was not triumphant. There was no rush of victory, no swell of vindictive pleasure. Instead, there was silence, a heavy, cleansing silence that replaced the constant thrum of doubt she had carried for months, perhaps years without knowing it. She didn't celebrate Jonathan's fall. She acknowledged it as the inevitable consequence of his choices. She packed her things with calm deliberation. Each box closed felt like a chapter finished, not destroyed but completed. Friends came by with meals, neighbors offered quiet support, and her family called often, their voices carrying steady reassurance. For the first time in years, Hannah felt no need to explain herself, no urge to defend her marriage against cracks she had refused to see. On a crisp morning in November, she walked through the house one last time. The walls held memories, both tender and painful, but they no longer bound her. She left the keys on the counter, turned off the lights, and closed the door behind her. In that small, unremarkable act, she stepped into a future she could shape herself. There were moments when grief cut through, sharp and uninvited. Nights when the bed felt too wide, mornings when the quiet pressed against her ears. But even in those moments, a deeper current ran steady, relief. She was free from the constant threat of betrayal, free from lies told with a smile, free from a man who had chosen deceit over devotion. Hannah found solace in routine. She returned to work with renewed focus, picked up hobbies she had abandoned, and allowed herself to dream without the shadow of Jonathan's secrets. She began jogging by the lake, the cold air biting her cheeks, each mile a reminder that her strength had not been broken. She cooked for herself, not out of duty, but out of joy, filling her kitchen with the scents she loved. She never once replayed the video. It had served its purpose. The truth had been shown, justice delivered. Now she left it behind. Jonathan's downfall lingered in the town's gossip, but Hannah paid it little mind. His loss was his own to bear. Wife, friends, reputation, stability all gone. He had built his life on deception, and when the lies collapsed, there was nothing left standing. For Hannah, the path forward was not about revenge anymore. It was about dignity reclaimed. She carried herself with quiet confidence, knowing she had refused to be broken, knowing she had chosen honesty over illusion. The future stretched wide, uncharted, and for the first time, it felt like hers alone.